A Python function is a block of organized, reusable code that is used to perform a single related action. Functions provide better modularity for your application and a high degree of code reusing. You define a function using the def keyword, followed by a function name, parentheses, and a colon. Inside the parentheses, you can pass 0 or more parameters. So let's create a simple greeting function. So to create our function, we use the def keyword followed by the name of the function that we want to call. So we'll say greet, colon, and then under this, we define the functionality of this function. So let's say we want to print hello and welcome to the tutorial. And now if we want to execute that function, then we just call it by using this. And when we click play, this function runs whatever was defined under it, which is hello, except misspelled. Hello and welcome to the tutorial. Functions become more flexible when parameters are involved. Parameters are variables passed into the function. So let's slightly modify our greet function so that we could pass a name. So let's say we give the parameter name, and then we want to use that parameter inside our function. So let's change this a little bit and make this an F string. And here we'll say hello name. Welcome to the tutorial. And so here, when we call our function, we could provide a name such as John. And then when we run this function, it will use that parameter, pass it into the function, and use it wherever we want to use it. Functions can also return values. To let a function return a result, use the return statement. It exits the function and optionally passes back an expression to the caller. So let's create a simple function that adds two numbers. So let's define our function and call it add numbers, where we have two parameters that we pass in, which could be an x and y for our two numbers. Then we're going to return x plus y, so adding the two numbers. And then when we run our function, add numbers, let's add 5 and 3. And let's also assign that to a result. And then let's print the result. And when we run this, it gives us 8. So we passed in two parameters, which were two numbers. Those numbers were added together and the function returned that result. That returned result was then assigned to the result variable, and then we printed that result. You can also set default values for parameters, which will be used if no argument is passed. So let's modify this slightly, and let's say we want to, by default, assign the y value to 10. And so when we do not pass in a value for y, then by default, this is going to be equal to 10. And then it should do 5 plus 10. So when we run this, we see it's 15. But if we put in a different number, such as 5, then that number is going to overwrite the default value, and it will return 10. When you call a function, you can specify the arguments by naming them. This allows for a more readable code and skipping some arguments if defaults are set. So let's create a new function that describes our pet. So let's call our function describe pet, where we have two arguments, which is the animal and name. And we're just going to print I have a animal named name Now, when we call it, we can now specify which arguments or which parameters accept which values. So we can specify that the name is going to be Whiskers and the animal is a cat. That way, we are aware which value we're assigning to which parameter, and makes it clear that the name parameter is going to be Whiskers and the animal parameter is going to be the cat. And then, of course, when we run this, I have a cat named Whiskers. If you don't know how many arguments will be passed into your function, add a star or asterisk before the parameter name in the function definition. This way, the function will receive a tuple of arguments. So let's create a new function where we're going to make a pizza. So let's define our function make pizza, and our argument is going to be toppings for that pizza, but we are going to put a star or asterisk before toppings. Now, what we're going to basically do is print making a pizza with the following toppings, and we're going to print out the toppings that we're going to provide. So for topping in toppings, print, and we're just going to format this a little bit. And so this is going to basically print the topping, because toppings is going to be a tuple of arguments. And so we're going to be iterating over the list or the tuple of toppings and printing them out. So let's say we're going to make a pizza with pepperoni, and we're going to make a pizza with mushrooms, green peppers, and some extra cheese. And so when we run that, we get that for the first one, we made just pepperoni. And for the second one, we have our 3 ingredients: mushrooms, peppers, and cheese. So this can take any number of arguments, and we could do whatever we want with those number of arguments or parameters that are passed into the function. A function that calls itself is also known as a recursive function. A very popular recursive function is also called a factorial. A factorial is multiplying a certain number down to the first number. So if you provide the number 5, then it's multiplying 5 times 4 times 3 times 2 times 1. And that is your result. So to create the factorial function, we're going to do def factorial, and n is going to be our number. So if n equals 1, then we're going to return 1. And else, if it's not 1, then we're going to return n times factorial n minus 1. So basically, each time when we provide a number, we want to multiply that number times the number minus 1. And we want to keep doing that until we reach 1. So like I mentioned before, when we do factorial of 5, it gives us 120. So it's 5 times 4 times 3 times 2 times 1. There are also lambda functions, which are Small anonymous functions defined with a Lambda keyword. They can have any number of arguments, but only one expression. So basically, in other words, Lambda functions are functions that don't have a name. When we create a function, we define that name using the def statement, but Lambdas don't have a name, but they do have some kind of expression. So let's create a simple Lambda function where we want to square a number. So let's say square equals lambda x, where x is squared. So square number, we use 2 asterisks or 2 stars. And so square is our lambda function, which is basically this entire expression. And if we want to do, let's say, square 5, then we get 25. So there you have it. Become a member at AILearningHub.io and get access to personalized mentor guidance, early access to AI resources, help with AI projects, and a great learning community.